Thank you. Deb, would you please call the roll?
My pleasure. Mr. McFarland.
Here.
Ms. Ekman. Mr. Duffy.
Here.
Mr. Knights.
Here.
And Dr. Sugini.
Here.
Thank you. Please be advised that prior to this meeting, we had an executive session in which we discussed personnel and real estate. The first item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which is consideration to approve minutes, all reports, and other agency minutes, and approve payment of bills. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Questions or comments from the public? Being none, I call for the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Item 2 on the agenda is presentations, and this evening we will hear an update on the MS4 Skippack Creek Watershed Consortium from Tim Woodrow. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland. When talking stormwater, I'm never quite sure how far back in history to go, but needless to say, recall that the EPA, around the early 2000s, imposed upon many watersheds in Pennsylvania a TMDL, a total maximum daily loading of nutrient and sediment for the creeks, and they have given us an obligation to reduce that sediment load in a Skippack Creek, for sure. And so starting back in 2015, we started trying to work together with all the municipalities in the Skippack Creek watershed to try and work cooperatively, try and not to play Friday night football, and try and be together as one unified front and share in cost and share in design and share in grant opportunities and those types of things. And we've made really good progress. And we were here before you earlier this year, maybe in January, February, and we thought we were very close to providing an agreement that would bind municipalities together, and we thought we were really close to striking a deal. Lower Salford Township got some cold feet. In the TMDL model that we had prepared, there was a perception that we were relying too much on Lower Salford Township. And it's true, many of the projects that we chose to put in the computer model were located in Lower Salford. They were concerned about giving up a lot of their real estate. We had taken some of their open lands and called for reforestation. They were concerned that in the future they might need those lands for public recreational space. They were a little concerned about the obligation to maintain these facilities in perpetuity, and how would that be funded. They were concerned about the grant opportunities, and they saw that perhaps these grants were a couple of $1,000 grants and not anything substantial. And so they went back and they said, well, what could we do by ourselves? And maybe it would be cheaper for us to stand alone rather than be part of the consortium. And they came to a conclusion that we felt was an error, but their conclusion nonetheless was it would be cheaper for them to stand alone. So we said, well, give us a minute or two. Let us go back and look at the computer model in the same way that you folks have. Let us show you some of the opportunities, and let us give you a little more background, and see if we can convince you that being part of our group is a good idea. So we had done that, and on actually May 1st, we sat down with members of Lower Providence Township, Skippack Township, Worcester, Lower Salford, Talmenson, Hatfield, solicitors, managers, and engineers, and we showed the assembled group kind of the results of some of the study that we had done in those intervening times. So Bill, maybe 2 slides forward would be good. Again, just to remind everyone, Skippack Creek Watershed has some other members beside those mentioned. A bit of Upper Gwinnett Township is in the watershed. Upper Gwinnett was instrumental in furnishing some of the early computer models. The Upper Gwinnett Board of Commissioners actually funded the initial computer model study that we have been relying on for our work. And so Upper Gwinnett, while not directly involved with our current consideration, is certainly involved in our watershed. Lansdale has been interested, but as of May 1st, they would suggest that perhaps they want to get involved. They were not included in some of the original calculations, but Lansdale has some renewed interests. So we've reached out to Lansdale, to John Ernst, their manager, and he might very well be interested in participating as well. So it looks like we have a pretty good assembled group. And we have explained to everyone assembled on May 1st that we keep hearing from DEP that DEP is really looking for a win in this TMDL program. They very much are in support of our proposed consortium of communities. They would very much like to see us formalize this agreement, for us to submit a TMDL plan, and for us to be kind of the benchmark, kind of a shining star in this TMDL world that's very complicated and fraught with regulation and frustration. So they really see us as an opportunity to point to a success and a win. So, Bill, maybe 2 more slides. In this agreement that we spoke about early on this year, we decided that it would be fairest to apportion cost associated with improvements based upon the allocation of watershed and the contribution to the waste load that is defined in the TMDL plan. And everybody, I think, was kind of good with that. We also redid the model and took out those areas of each township that did not contribute directly to our storm sewer systems, which kind of had the effect of lowering our obligation for waste load reduction. Other folks have that obligation, PennDOT most notably, as well as some large industrial users in the watershed. A lot of those industrial users are meat packers and Hatfield and some of those large industrial guys up in the higher in the watershed. So we were showing Lower Salford that when we did the math in a similar fashion to the way that they had done the math, we're coming out more apples to apples comparison. We also showed Lower Salford, Bill, maybe the next slide, an opportunity to show projects that were distributed throughout the watershed and were not so Lower Salford exclusive. We've got a number of projects that we've shown as potential projects in Lower Providence. We have a basin at the park back here, some fire company bioswales, some other public park properties that we own where we could install some stream bank stabilization, some rain gardens, some things that would really help with reducing our waste load allocation. And then we kind of totaled up all of those projects and some estimated costs. And we are still looking at a total project cost of somewhere between $10 and $12 million to meet our TMDL obligations. Again, that's over a 5-year period. It's divided amongst 6 municipalities, we're hoping. But then maybe the best news that we have for those assembled is some of the success stories that others have received. And Bill, if we go to that last page. There are grants that have recently been given, Pembroke Middle School, Skipback Creek a little further up, Wissahickon Creek projects, but these grants were in the amount of $305,000, $274,000, $150,000, $300,000. These are some sizable grants that have been awarded for watershed projects like the ones we'll need to consider moving forward. So we really believe that once Lower Salford was provided with this information, they are, again, interested in joining and understand the benefit of working as a group and understanding that going as a group, our opportunities for being favorably reviewed by grant writers would be improved. And so folks like the Commonwealth Funding Authority, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, DEP, DCNR, PennDOT, the Schuylkill River Restoration Fund, all have money and they're all anxious to spend it on these good environmental projects. So we think that kind of time is of the essence. Where the money's available, we should formalize our group and get everybody moving. The assemble group on May 1st included the solicitors, and they always had, details they wanted to discuss. But I think we left that meeting, and Don, maybe you can weigh in as well, that I think we had a pretty positive outcome. And we're hoping that over the next couple of weeks after we provided this information and some more details to the solicitors and managers that could better understand where we're heading, that hopefully we'll have another agreement to present to you folks for consideration in the coming weeks. So that's kind of where we are as of today. And again, I believe this is all a very good thing for the watershed, a very good thing for the health of our natural places. And hopefully we'll have an agreement that will work for us moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
Tim, I appreciate you not starting back at Noah's flood for your,
Yeah,
your
you're
history.
welcome.
When do we think that we can expect to see some sort of concrete or finite cost analysis for what it's going to cost Lower Providence, and then what that is going to translate into with respect to meeting our obligation to reduce the TMDL?
Yeah, and Patrick, I think we've got a pretty good idea of a worst-case scenario. This $10 to $12 million over the next 5 to 15 years is really what we're looking at. But we really hope that we could offset much of those costs through grant opportunities. So I think we can paint a worst-case scenario. Give us 60 days, and we'll get those numbers refined and out to all the municipalities. I think we've kind of agreed to do that when last we met. At that point, we can really talk maybe in a little more detail as to what our really critical obligations will be moving forward.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had talked about this before and had identified upwards of $700,000 potentially as the financial obligation.
Yes. Correct.
Initially.
Yeah, initially. And again, it's a dynamic process. You know, these projects, as we start to look at the projects we need to do to meet our waste load reductions, it's hard to determine, you know, exactly when they're being bid and when those costs will come back. I think we've tried to use some conservative numbers for things like riparian corridor restoration, stream bank stabilization, reforestation. So all of those things are components that are kind of our bag of tricks that we can use to meet that waste load reduction. And that's why we're kind of in that $10 million range. Again, not in any given year, but over a period of time. And again, we really believe that there are some grants that will really help us through that process.
And Tim, was that 700,000 some odd dollars in 1 year or over 5 years?
Well, we were concerned. We didn't really know. Yeah, we think that $700,000 and the number that we should be ready to absorb. The hope was that that could be spread out over a number of years as opposed to any one given year. But that, I think, is a realistic number to budget in our minds.
So Tim, this meeting that you had on May 1st, would you say that the outlook in Lower Salford is a little more optimistic than it was prior to the meeting? I mean,
Yes.
It is.
It is.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, one of the supervisors, Chris Canavan from WB Homes, is a supervisor in Lower Salford. And I've had a number of conversations with him since they left and since May 1st. And he is feeling much more positive about the whole process, yes.
Okay, good. You mentioned that the arrangement looking forward was to assign cost by percentage according to the TMDL plan.
Correct.
And who draws up that plan?
The EPA actually drafted the TMDL study. And in that TMDL study, each municipality was allocated specifically. Lower Providence was required to remove X pounds of sediment. We had to remove 372,547 cubic pounds of sediment per year in our watershed. And so you take a look at the total reduction of about 5.4 million pounds per year. You take our percentage of that, and that's how we were going to arrive at a proportionate share of those costs.
Okay. And that plan is not subject to change, if you will, the TDML plan. I mean, the estimates that were made were the conclusion of a study that put this in perspective. Right?
Yeah, and we were able to refine the study a bit. The EPA acknowledged that the computer model they were using in 2005 was not completely accurate. It may have been too conservative. And so one of the reasons we hired Greg Duncan, if you remember Greg Duncan's name, his firm up in Bethlehem actually specializes in this computer model. And so we've been relying on him for some assistance in re-inputting some of the information and kind of reanalyzing where these projects come and go from and to. And he was able to actually reduce our obligation by rerunning that computer model with some better, more accurate information.
Right, and just final question, what portion of this total load is responsibility of the Evansburg State Park, and how is that being managed?
Good question. The way that TMDL is written and the way the obligation falls out, the obligation is based upon urbanized areas. So each community, there's a map that EPA prepared that defines an urbanized area. And so Evansburg State Park is not in an urbanized area, and so therefore they don't have an obligation. One of the things that we talked about early on, though, is that a lot of the damage to the creek, a lot of the erosion and sediment is being generated by increased velocity and increased volumes that run down the creek. So maybe one of the best places to treat the symptoms would be in the park. They have the most stream bank frontage. They have the most opportunity to get in there and do some stream bank stabilization. And so we don't want to exclude DCNR as a partner in the program. One of the things that we heard from Jen Fields, who was the DEP director in Norristown as we started this process. Jen's now moved up to the EPA, but her concern is that we don't only treat the symptoms or the symptoms, that we treat the disease itself. And the disease itself is many older subdivisions that were built in the 50s and the 60s and 70s without proper stormwater management. As we looked at Stoughton not too long ago with some of the neighbors down there, Peter, we saw that, there's no detention basins, there's very little in the way of storm sewer systems. So a lot of that impervious surface really flashes during a storm and causes a lot of erosion and carries with it a lot of pollutants. And if you look at the obligations that we put on development today, you see what's happening at Providence Place, at WB Homes, poor Lidl, they had a completely impervious site, but they've been required to install a huge underground stormwater management system, some above ground rain gardens. And so the problem isn't so much as we see it, development that's occurring today, but it's development that occurred before stormwater and intelligent stormwater design really came into play.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? We'll look forward to your update.
Yeah, be back soon. Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is item 3, new business, and the first item is a public hearing on the Verizon franchise renewal, and Township Manager Delamater has information on that.
Thank you, Mr. McFarland. Lower Providence, along with many other municipalities in Montgomery County, probably 20 or more, joined together to negotiate the franchise agreement with Verizon, the renewal of that agreement. About 12 years ago, we all joined together as well to negotiate the original franchise agreement with Verizon, and that's up for renewal now. We're utilizing an outside consultant to perform this, and as part of the process, we have to hold we call it a public hearing. It's just an agenda item on our agenda this evening, to solicit comments from the public about the Verizon cable services provided in the township. So as we move forward with negotiations, as our consultant does, he'll be provided these comments from all the municipalities and can incorporate them into the discussions with Verizon, try to whether it's increased service or whatever. So I have a statement here to read, and then at that point, we'll open it up to the public to provide any comments that they have. And again, this is just to solicit comments. We'll take those comments and then go back to Verizon with those. So it isn't here for us to answer questions or anything like that, but it's part of the process to get comments. We didn't have an ad in the paper for this. I also placed it on our Facebook page and the website, and even provided an opportunity if residents weren't able to make tonight's meeting, they could email me their comments, which I did receive one. So it was received by at least one person in the public. So let me read through this, and then we'll move into that. So good evening. This is a public hearing of the Lower Providence Township Board of Supervisors regarding cable franchise renewal for Lower Providence Township. This public hearing is held pursuant to Section 626 of the Federal Cable Act, which sets forth the process for franchise renewal. The township's current franchise with Verizon has expired on October 19, 2018, and the township is in the process of renewing the franchise. This public hearing is part of the preliminary portion of the franchise renewal in which the township reviews the cable operator's past performance and identifies the township's future cable-related community needs. As such, as part of this public hearing, we invite comments from any citizens who wish to speak regarding either or both of the aforementioned subjects. Franchise renewal is the best opportunity for municipalities to assert their rights with respect to their cable operators and to obtain important benefits in return for granting the cable operators the right to use their right-of-ways, their public right-of-ways. These benefits include a state-of-the-art cable system now and in the future, strong customer service standards, free services to community facilities, better reporting requirements from the cable operator, maximize franchise fees, an educational and governmental EG channel, capital support for active EG channels, legal protections of the right-of-way, and better mechanisms to enforce the franchise agreement. These are just some of the potential benefits available through this franchise renewal. Citizens may address these items or any other cable-related items that are important to them. We'll now open the hearing up to citizens' comments. Thank you. So at this point, if there are any citizens who wish to make any comments about their cable-related services, you could please come up to the podium now.
No one wishes to comment on Verizon? Anybody on the board want to offer any comments? As a consumer?
Just wanted to ask a question. Will we be doing the same hearing for Comcast?
Yes, but it'll probably be part of, it won't necessarily, because Comcast is much more established than Verizon is, but this is the first renewal with Verizon, so it was important to get out ahead of, I think, them. With Comcast, yeah, we will be coming back to you. We're actually negotiating that. The solicitor's office and myself are doing those negotiations with Comcast, and we'll come to you once we have somewhat of an agreement, proposed agreement.
I do have one comment I would like to make. I find the pricing very confusing. If you want to go out and, as a consumer, if I want to go out and figure out what does this set of channels cost versus that with a cell phone, it's very difficult to figure it out. That's my comment.
Okay, and just a reminder, this is just cable TV services. That's all we're negotiating. Whether, if it's cell phone, if it's internet, that's a whole separate
The same comment applies, just restricted to the cable.
okay,
Yes.
very good. I just wanted to make sure.
And
you're
thank you
aware
for
of
that.
Matt, how's your cable service?
Doing great.
Okay. We'll put that in there.
Doing great?
Doing great.
Very good.
Okay, hearing,
I do have one, sorry.
There you go.
There's a question on that. There's a Paracolis, Windsor Drive. There's a fee associated with this, correct, on our bills?
Correct. There's a
Okay.
franchise fee.
Okay. And as part of this, are we renegotiating that fee? Like, is there potential that the rate would go up based on this negotiation, or is it set?
It will not go up because it's already set at the maximum that's allowed by the law.
Okay, all right, I didn't know.
5% is the maximum, and that's what it was negotiated first time.
And that fee goes directly to, it's a line item in our budget, correct, as the township?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing will close. We'll move on.
Very good. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is item 3B, consideration of resolution 2019-22, approving the final land development plan for Courts at Brynwood Phase 2, and Solicitor Rice has information on that.
Okay, this is final plan approval of the townhouse development that originally consisted of, well, still does, of 139 townhome dwelling units. The board had granted preliminary plan approval back in 2017, and then the applicant went to final on Phase 1 and funded Phase 1, and they're under construction on Phase 1. So now phase one was 88 of the 139. This is phase two, it's 51. This is merely, lets them fund the construction on phase two. This will be recorded as the final plan for phase two. Nothing has changed on the plans since this preliminary plan approval. So they split it up, I think, mainly for financing purposes, and now they're ready to go on to phase two. If the board has any questions, I really don't have anything to add to it. It's pretty simple and straightforward at this point. Since they had the preliminary plan approval, that proved everything 2 years ago.
And they also visited with us in our last meeting and answered questions that might have occurred. So can I have a motion on resolution number 2019-22?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 219-22.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Next on the agenda is consideration of Resolution 2019-23, approving submission of sewage facilities planning module for 805 North Park Avenue. And Mr. Mazinski has information on that for us.
Thank you. In response to a request by David Erb of representing Liberty Commercial Development, before you is a resolution for a revision of the DEP's sewer facilities plan, and this is basically to permit a sewer extension. This extension will serve the 2 new dwelling units that were created by the subdivision plan that you approved back in December of 2018. So this is really more or less a formality, but DEP does require the township, the municipality, to issue a resolution so that the applicant, Liberty in this case, can pursue their sewer planning revision.
Thank you. Can I have a motion on Resolution 2019-23?
I make a motion to approve a resolution 2019-23.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Questions? None from the board. Questions from the public? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Item 3D, consideration of a request from the Lower Providence Fire Department for extension of operating hours for the annual Fireman's Fair, and Chief Turtle has information on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the past several years, the fire company has approached the board for permission to extend the hours on certain evenings. We have allowed that in the past, and I see no reason to not do that again this year.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments from the board?
I would make the motion to approve the extension of the operating hours for the Fireman Fair for 2019.
I would second it.
Motion and a second. Questions, comments? None from the board. Questions, comments from the public? No. Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Item 3E. Item 3E, pension distribution authorization, and Ms. Golis has information on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the board's packet, you have information on Mr. William Wilfong, a former employee of the township. On May 1st of this year, he became eligible for the vested portion of his pension benefit. As is the practice as recommended by the Auditor General's office, the pension benefit needs to be reviewed and authorized by our governing body, and that's why it is before you this evening for your authorization.
Thank you. We have the pension distribution authorization form in front of us. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Questions, comments? Questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 3F, proclamation recognizing Older Americans Month, and I feel well qualified to read this. Proclamation, Older Americans Month, May of 2019. Whereas Lower Providence Township includes a growing number of older Americans who enrich our community through their diverse life experiences, and whereas the township is committed to strengthening our community by connecting with and supporting older adults, their families, and caregivers, and acknowledging their many valuable contributions to society, and whereas the township recognizes the importance of bringing together all generations and engaging in activities that promote physical, mental, and emotional well-being for the benefit of all. Now, therefore, we, the Board of Supervisors of Lower Providence Township, do hereby proclaim May 2019 to be Older Americans Month, and urge every resident to take time during this month to recognize older adults and the people who serve them as essential and valuable members of the community. Dated this 16th day of May, 2019. Next item on the agenda is the discussion of a sustainability resolution. Who would like to make a motion on that?
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases you, I've circulated a new draft resolution. There are copies out in the audience there. Supervisor Knights and I have worked very hard together over the last 2 weeks since our last meeting, going back and forth, making very many revisions, corrections, additions, deletions, language alterations to come up with this draft of the version of the sustainability. I'd like to thank Gary for his time and his input. Was very valuable, and I enjoyed working with Gary on this. And I think what you see before you is a resolution, well, not certainly perfect, because no resolution is ever going to be perfect or meet all the needs of all the constituencies. I think this is a good first step for Lower Providence Township. There were some additions outlining some of the past contributions Lower Providence has made, in addition to what was already highlighted in previous versions. We also talked about the consortium with the other 6 municipalities for the skip-back watershed, and the riparian buffer ordinance that was passed in 2016 by this board, as well, to protect our waterways here in the township and keep them clean from sediment and nutrient pollution. And it doesn't even go into some of the other things that the township has done over the past several years, including completely rewriting our stormwater ordinance. Right, Mr. Woodrow, we did that in 2017 to further protect the environment here. In 2014, through a grant with the Perkiomen Valley Watershed, we planted new trees and removed invasive species from Cranberry Park. In 2015, we planted new trees through the same grant from the same conservatory along Park Avenue there, where we have our mulch pile. So this board has certainly taken steps in the past 5.5 years and before then to protect our environment to the extent possible. And this is another step that we can do that. The resolution is very similar to the previous 2 versions that Gary and I had introduced. And it takes concrete steps for the sustainability efforts here in the township in terms of replacing any buildings, any energy-consuming systems or devices that we analyze those. We look at cost analysis and functional analysis. Like, for instance, I don't know if we'll ever be at a place here in our society where we have electric plows, because I think plows need to have a little more horsepower to move the snow, but certainly electric vehicles when we're talking about code cars and things like that. So I think this is a good step. I welcome any comments on it. And again, I would like to thank Gary for his time and his input in working with me on this.
Yeah, and similarly, we just passed a proclamation on, older Americans. I think we're doing something for the next generations here. I'm glad we're discussing as a board sustainability. Mr. Duffy and I created a nonpartisan, bipartisan compromise resolution that you have before us. I think this is an important topic. 99% of climate change experts say climate change is real and caused by humans. 78% of Americans believe that. 65% of Americans believe that change will hurt Americans. So it's a real topic. Like Mr. Duffy said, we worked together on this. Some things were added, some things were taken away. It's a compromise. It includes input from all the board members. Mr. Sorgini posited that it should apply to municipal assets. Ms. Ekman argued for educational outreach. Mr. McFarland suggested that we don't need the references to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They talked about some of the reasons for this. I'm very happy on the progress. This has very quickly moved from a discussion in executive session to several back and forth meetings on this. In the last meeting, Ms. McCool provided some expert input. Representative Webster's office applauded our efforts as a board and urged us to continue to work together on this. And so Mr. Duffy and I did that, and I urge the rest of the board to vote in the affirmative on this.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution on sustainability.
Would this be Resolution 2019-24?
It had a number.
-24, yes.
I'll make the motion to approve resolution number 2019-24 on sustainability.
I would second that motion.
Motion and a second. Any other comments from the board? Comments from the public?
Good evening. You heard from me last week. Erin McCool, Cold Spring Drive. This is the first time that I've seen this new version of the resolution, but I would like to thank you. I echo Mr. Knight's comments that clearly it looks like a lot of work has been put into this resolution. A lot of conversations have happened, and I think you've really made a lot of progress. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I'll also say, I'm very encouraged that there is a lot of new technology that is coming to the forefront, and things are changing really quickly. So I would just encourage you to continue to push forward with this conversation. If there is an opportunity to engage a citizen advisory board, I would encourage you to do that as well. And I would be happy to support any effort, especially anything around education and communication, because that is my background. So, but I applaud your efforts, and thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm just reading it now. Beginning October 1st, 2019.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, miss, would you give your name and address just for the record, please?
Oh, Marcia Atkins, 29 Vo Lane.
Thank you.
Okay. Beginning on October 1st, 2019, township consultants are to review all subdivision and land development projects and include a recommendation section in their review letters on how the developments can increase sustainability in the project above those mandated by ordinance. Could you comment? Could you explain that to me?
Sure. Well, thank you for coming out this evening. Certainly, anytime that we have a land development or plan, all of our consultants, including the lighting consultant, the landscape consultant, our traffic engineer, our civil engineer, our fire marshal, they all review the plans and they write review letters seeing where they meet ordinances or where they fail to meet ordinances. And particularly, I guess, where they fail to meet ordinances because we want to bring them up to compliance with our ordinances. This resolution will require our consultants to go a step further, to review those plans and to give a recommendation that exceeds what is required by those ordinances, what is required by law, and give those recommendations to the land developer on how they can make their project more sustainable, more environmentally friendly. Obviously, the developers will not be required to go beyond law, but we're hopeful and that we're leading by example, and we're telling them that these are the type of projects that we want to see here in Lower Providence, things that are more environmentally friendly, things that are more sustainable, with the hopes that they carry through on those recommendations.
Okay. Yeah, my concern would be that we don't have regulations that are more stringent than other townships. around us, because I'm so happy that we have Redner's going in Audubon, and the new coffee shop that was in Cumberland. These buildings were empty for so long, and we have Bud's Bar forever in our face. And so I just want to be very welcoming to anybody that wants to have a building project or move into our township. And I wouldn't want regulations that would hamper and cause someone to say, you know, I think I'll go somewhere else.
And that was the point that why it's drafted the way it is. We're not requiring at this time that anybody go above and beyond what a typical township requires through their already existing ordinances. This is not a rewrite of our whole ordinance. This is just saying, hey, your project meets code, your project meets our ordinance, but have you thought about these steps which would make it more environmentally friendly?
Okay.
And that's all our consultants will be doing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carried. Next on the agenda is item 4, announcements. The Planning Commission will meet on May 22nd at 7 p.m. The Zoning Hearing Board will meet on May 23rd at 7 p.m. The Lower Providence Fire Department's annual Fireman's Fair will be held June 6th through June 15th and on the Fire Department grounds at 3199 Ridge Pike in Eagleville. And information is available at www.lpfire.com. That's an annual event that I'm sure most township residents are familiar with, and we look forward to that every year, including this one. One other final announcement I will make by way of information is that the next Township Open House, which will be the 3rd one, we've had 2 others in prior years in the spring. This one is going to be held in the fall and has been scheduled for Tuesday, September 24th at the Arcola Middle School. So we will have much more information on that as it comes up, but note your calendars. We hope to have as good an attendance or better than we've had in the previous years, and to provide as much information on developments in the township that are going on to all of those people who can attend. Any other comments or business?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One, as another announcement, the Parks and Rec Department will be meeting this coming Monday, the 20th, here in the auditorium. That is a night before their normal meeting. They normally meet on Tuesdays. However, this month we're meeting on Monday night because the election, the primary, is taking place on the 21st, and we'll be using this building. So along those lines, please, everybody make sure you vote. It's important that you do. For both parties, get out there, make your vote be heard. The other thing is please be patient with the elections and the polls this year. Montgomery County has a new voting system, new voting machines. They are utilizing paper ballots. There's probably going to be some hiccups. There's probably going to be a learning curve for everybody involved, so please be patient. Give yourself extra time to go to the polls and vote. Don't go and see a line and get frustrated. Please stay and vote. It's important. Moving on back to Parks and Rec. As you are aware, I'm the liaison to the Parks and Rec Board. There's recently been a vacancy on the Parks and Rec Board. Mr. Delamater had advertised the vacancy and asked for submissions. We received a few. One of them is from Amy Johnston Smith, who is a local resident and business owner. She has been to some of the Park and Rec's meetings. And I think she would make an excellent addition to the Parks and Rec Board. And as such, I would be making a motion that we appoint Amy Johnson Smith to the Parks and Rec Board to fill the vacancy.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any questions, comments? Questions or comments from the public? Being none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Any other new business or comments from the board? Okay, courtesy of the floor. Would anyone have any comments? Courtesy of the floor. Seeing none, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
And I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.